Welcome back to Cold Crime Case Diaries, where forgotten trails, chilling mysteries, and unanswered questions come to life. Today, we begin one of the most haunting stories in modern American true crime history. A story of two innocent girls, the quiet town, and a killer who walked among them in silence. This is the Delphi murders, and what you're about to hear isn't just a case file. It's a heart-wrenching journey through grief, fear, and a relentless search for justice. A story that shook an entire nation, that captured headlines for years, and that still leaves behind more questions than answers. In this three-part investigative series, we'll take you deep into the woods of Delphi, Indiana, where two best friends vanished during a walk on an old railroad bridge, leaving behind a single eerie video and the most haunting clue ever recorded by a victim. This is part one. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and follow us through every step of this gripping journey. We promise you won't forget this story. Because sometimes the scariest monsters aren't strangers. They're the people who walk right past you. The silence that clung to the trees that winter afternoon would haunt the small Indiana town of Delphi for years to come. What began as a simple outing, two best friends hiking the Monon High Bridge Trail, turned into a case that would grip the nation, spawn millions of theories, and tear open the heart of a community that never thought evil could live so close. On February 13th, 2017, the sky hung heavy with overcast clouds as 14-year-old Liberty German and her 13-year-old friend Abigail Williams laughed their way across the rusted planks of the old railroad bridge. The Monon High Bridge stood like a skeleton above the forest, a forgotten relic that had become a place of innocent exploration for local teens. It was a Monday, a day off from school, and the two girls had convinced Liberty's older sister, Kelsey, to drop them off just past lunch. It would be the last time anyone saw them alive. By nightfall, the worry had already begun to seep into the community. When the girls failed to show up at the designated pickup point, family members began to search the trail. Flashlights cut through the trees as darkness fell, but there was no sign of Abby or Libby. Panic hadn't quite set in yet, not until the sun began to rise the next morning and their phones remained silent. By the time volunteers formed a search party on the morning of February 14th, there was an undercurrent of dread in the air. Everyone wanted to believe the girls were just lost, that they'd fallen, sprained an ankle, and were waiting under some tree. But then, around noon, just a quarter mile from the bridge, they were found, positioned strangely off-trail, in a clearing. And what was found at that scene, what police discovered and refused to speak about publicly for years, would fracture the soul of Delphi. When the Indiana State Police held their first press conference, there were few details, only that the bodies were believed to be Abby and Libby. The grief in the voices of law enforcement hinted at something far more sinister than a hiking accident. Investigators quickly locked down the scene and began piecing together what little they could. But the clue that would electrify the investigation wasn't found by police. It was recorded by Libby herself. On her phone was a short video, grainy, shaky footage showing a man walking toward them on the bridge, his hands in his pockets, head lowered. He looked like he was trying not to be seen. Then came the audio. "Guys, down the hill." 3 words, quiet and chilling, spoken with force. The voice of a man used to being obeyed. The man in the video would become known only as Bridge Guy, a figure the world would come to know pixel by pixel. It was an extraordinary piece of evidence, captured in the final moments of terror. Libby, perhaps sensing something was wrong, had started recording. Her bravery would become one of the few reasons this case didn't fade into another cold file. The image of Bridge Guy, dressed in a blue jacket and jeans, became the most analyzed clip in modern true crime history. Law enforcement released only a still frame and a few seconds of audio. The public wanted more. Why not release the full video? Why only one sentence? But investigators were tight-lipped. The details of the crime scene were deemed unique and sensitive. Rumors swirled. Had the killer left a message? Was it ritualistic? Were there signs of staging? Police refused to confirm or deny anything. Instead, they released a sketch. Then, 2 years later, they released a new one. The new suspect sketch looked entirely different. Like a younger man with a sharp jawline and wild hair. People were confused. Was this a second suspect? A new lead? Or had police changed their mind entirely? Delphi fell into suspicion. Everyone began looking at their neighbors differently. What if he's right here? People whispered. What if we see him at the grocery store? As time passed, the media frenzy began to slow. The case grew cold. The girls' families kept hope alive, pushing for awareness, clinging to the belief that justice was still possible. For 5 years, the town sat on a wound that refused to heal. Then on October 28, 2022, a name broke through the fog. Richard Matthew Allen, 50, of Delphi, was arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder. A local, a man who worked at the CVS in town, a father, a neighbor. He had processed photo film for the German family years earlier. He was hiding in plain sight. The news stunned the community. Allen had voluntarily spoken to police back in 2017, admitting he'd been on the Monon High Bridge the day of the murders. At the time, he said he didn't see the girls. Police, swamped with tips, didn't pursue it further. But years later, as investigators re-examined old interviews and new digital forensics, Allen's statement was reanalyzed. A search of his home turned up a .40 caliber unspent bullet between the girls' bodies, matching a gun registered to Allen. And in jail, he made multiple confessions, according to court filings. But even then, the case was far from straightforward. Allen's defense attorneys made a stunning claim, that he was being set up and that the girls' deaths were actually part of a bizarro dentist cult ritual carried out by other men in the area. The theory was as wild as it was unsupported. Prosecutors slammed the idea, saying it was meant to confuse the public and distract from the overwhelming evidence against Allen. Still, the story gripped the nation once more. In October 2024, the trial finally began. It was one of the most emotionally charged proceedings Indiana had ever seen. The families of Abby and Libby sat in court every day. Some days they wept. Others, they stared at Allen with quiet rage. The evidence was devastating. Forensic experts testified about the ballistic match. Investigators revealed that Allen's cell phone had pinged near the bridge at the time of the crime. Multiple jail calls and confessions were played aloud, including one where Allen allegedly told his wife, "It was me." The most heartbreaking moment came when prosecutors showed a never-before-seen 43-second version of Libby's video. In it, she could be heard breathing rapidly. Abby's voice trembles. And the man, bridge guy, can be heard calmly repeating his command, "Guys, down the hill." In the silence that followed, many in the courtroom were left sobbing. On November 11, 2024, after 19 hours of deliberation, the jury found Richard Allen guilty on all counts. 1 month later, he was sentenced to 130 years in prison, 65 for each girl. The judge did not mince words. "You have stolen from this community," she said. "You murdered innocents." Outside the courthouse, family members released statements. "We waited 7 years for this," said Becky Patty, Libby's grandmother. "And still there's no peace." Yet even in conviction, questions remained. Why had Allen done it? Was he truly alone? What about the ritualistic rumors and the sealed documents? The public was left to guess at the full horror of what happened in that clearing. Then, in early 2025, more evidence was unsealed. A longer version of the Bridge Guy video was released to the public for the first time. It showed Libby turning back, glancing at the man. She whispered, "Abby, run." There were the sounds of footsteps, a scuffle. Then it cut out. Jailhouse recordings also surfaced. In one, Allen told a fellow inmate that they didn't scream much. In another, he broke down sobbing, saying he didn't know what came over him. Experts debated whether Allen had suffered a psychotic break, or if this had been coldly premeditated. But for the families, the motive hardly mattered anymore. Their daughters were gone. And now, All that was left were the echoes of a voice forever burned into the conscience of America. Guys, down the hill. 2 girls walked into the woods that day and never came back. But what they left behind, a voice, a video, a mystery, would echo across the nation. As the trail grew cold and leads dried up, a single question haunted everyone. Who was the man on the bridge? In part 2, we go deeper into the mind of the accused, the family's agonizing wait for answers, and the moment justice finally knocked on Delphi's door. Or did it? The story is far from over. If this moved you, like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to Cold Crime Case Diaries. Your support helps keep these stories alive and gives voice to the silenced. Turn on your notifications so you don't miss part 2, coming soon. Because in Delphi, the woods are still whispering, and the truth is still unfolding.